So, Chris, great to see you today. You are a rare breed. You are a rare breed. You are a person who's, from what I've seen and understood, led on transformations. You advise lots of companies on transformations. You're a speaker. You're obviously a researcher. You're an innovator, entrepreneur, and you're a trainer using your strategy tools. I've probably some other roles I haven't been mentioned. Anything else in your brilliant portfolio I should have captured?
Well, I think we probably would add student to that mix. The only way in which I'm able to, do these things that you mentioned is because I'm curious and I really try to learn, whether that is in conferences, the Drucker Forum is fantastic, whether it's papers or books, but simply by learning from people. And I learn from all of my clients, I learn from all of my engagements. So students should probably be high on that list as well.
That's a great mindset to have. So tell me then, kicking off on that perspective, so whether it's your own fora that you curate yourself or the ones you just mentioned, when you've been in a virtual world over the last 6 months, 12 months, what are some of the ideas or concepts in the sort of broad field of strategy where you thought, wow, that's pushing the boundaries, that's exciting, that's at the sort of frontiers? What would come to mind?
Oh, that's a big question. But if I may, David, I'll split the answer in two quite separate parts. So I think the first part is just really connected into the COVID challenges, and I think that yes, there are a lot of companies that are going through a strategic self-reflection as a direct consequence of COVID. For example, one of my clients called me up and said, my management team are being run through 10 years of change in 3 months.
Yes.
And there's just no way that we're cognitively able to process this, but we have to, because our landscape is changing so fast. Yeah. So and he was sharing a story, David, of how he was trying to work through scenarios, and he just couldn't get the management team to process these new scenarios because they were supposed to be far off into the future.
Right.
So I think that when we look in the context of COVID, there are three categories. Number one, the losers, the stuck in the middle, and the winners. So for the losers, obviously we have tourism and aviation, and there's really not much they can do. You can't reinvent a airline based on the old infrastructure and the cost and balance sheet and everything. Yes. But you can pray for government support, and that's about it. No matter how you turn it, it is a losing environment. The second are the ones that stuck in the middle, and they have lots of options of trying to quickly pivot, quickly reinvent themselves. How do we spin this in the best possible way? And I'm very curious to see the IPO with Airbnb, because they were supposed to have been a loser, but they have been able to find themselves in that sort of middle category. Yes. And they may just land an IPO after all. The third category, that's the winners. Those are the companies that we didn't see back in March, but we're seeing now. It's Zoom, Netflix, Apple, and of course Amazon, simply because they had they had a business model in place, they had a strategy in place that allowed them to just take full advantage of the COVID situation. So it's not all bad, but for the majority of companies, at least, it's very challenging. So that's my answer in terms of being very COVID focused.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned scenarios there, and I guess many management teams are probably overwhelmed with up until now, maybe in the future, of just managing the day-to-day. You've gone through the crisis, still managing day-to-day exposures if you're in the first or second categories in particular. I guess in the third category, you're probably in the where do we go next? If we're doing so well, which opportunities, which parts of our ecosystems do we sort of nourish and try and explore further? There are some companies that still apply quite a traditional approach to strategy, even in a COVID situation, which is sort of strategy set by the center, top team, reasonably slow process, quite analytical, frankly driven by PowerPoint, and then sort of pushed out to the organization. And you mentioned earlier scenarios, and indeed you have some of your products, if you like, I may call them that, are simulations, tools, games. And I guess in my experience, some companies still put those simulations and tools in the let's have fun box, and then ignore that, and then come back into the day job, which is a more pedestrian strategy process. I know you pioneered them, putting them at the center of organizations as a sort of a capability and a mindset of simulating, thinking, scenario planning. Can you perhaps tell me a little bit more about how you think strategy could be, if you like, refreshed and made more dynamic through simulations and scenarios?
Absolutely, David. No, it's all about how you bring this to the table. And of course, if you walk into a CEO's office and said, why don't the two of us take a stroll on the beach? He may not respond very well. But if you say, as a part of our collaboration, it would be wise for us to have a space where we could really, get out of the office, find some format, whether that's a coffee shop or it's an outside venue where we could actually, think together. And that just happened to be, on a beach. Of course, the framing is very different. If I walk into a management team and I tell them, I have a really fun business game, and why don't we have a few beers? That's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
However, if I walk into the management team and really understand their challenges, and let's just say that it's a challenge of understanding transformation, and together we decide a 12-month process. And as a part of the 12-month process, I will be applying different ways of working, different formats, and different methodologies. And one of those methodologies will be, like you said, one of the world's most advanced business simulations. They may not even know that we're doing this before they actually get in the room. And it takes them a few minutes of what are we doing here? But like you said, the methodology of working, the way of working behind these simulations is highly engaging, hands-on, and I have never met a participant, even up to the highest like board level, that don't like it once they get into it. So, it's about the framing, it's about the introduction, but it's all about what are the outcomes you want to achieve. So when we work with simulations, whether with end clients or building out our global partner network, it's always, why is this relevant? Why is this methodology the right thing to achieve the end goal you want to have? And so, the work that we have done so far, David, on these simulations, we have 3 that are available: Transform for corporates, Scale Up for entrepreneurs and ecosystems, and Supercluster for more national governments. And we have 2 more in the pipeline coming soon. They are probably the most powerful teaching, learning, strategizing tools I have ever seen, ever. So, frame them, understand the challenge you're trying to solve and the goals you're trying to achieve. And it is just, it's magic, really. Big
and how
words,
do you they sound brilliant. I hope over the coming weeks and months, as we've talked about, get a chance to play more than I've been able to, and play and use them. But how do you sustain it? I get that the framing is important, so this is, in a way, it's a fun way to do it, but it's serious, it's relevant to your business, it's focused on outcomes. But how do you sustain it so it becomes a sort of, if you like, not just a tool, but a capability and a mindset in the team that you're working with?
Yeah, so we actually got to go back 20 years to Switzerland. So some of the original research upon which I'm building on is the Playing Seriously with Strategy with Johan Rose and Bart Victor. And what they did, in a management lab in Switzerland 20 years ago was basically saying most management teams, when they work on strategy, they have PowerPoint and Excel. And simply by using those business tools, you have already constrained the process of strategy.
Yes.
And the hypothesis they were working on was, what if we change the tools? What if you replace PowerPoint with Lego bricks? Is that going to change the outcome? And very quickly they realized, oh yes, it does. And it's really in that, line of thinking that we have been working and developing business simulations. Again, sometimes it's good to work in Excel. Sometimes it's good to work in PowerPoint. Sometimes it's good to work with studies on the wall. And sometimes it is just a perfect fit to work with one of the business simulations.
Yes.
And like anything else, you need to know how to handle it and how to work with the group. But I got to tell you, I love bringing it into groups ranging from management teams all the way to students at executive programs or MBA programs. And you can run it, and this is important, David, you can run it for 2 hours, or you can have exactly the same toolkit and you run it for 3 days straight, 8-hour days.
Right.
And that's when you're getting places.
Yeah. And I guess it's interesting. You'll have simulations or scenarios or whatever term you use in other aspects of a business. I've seen it in, obviously, crisis management being an example where people do, look at, for example, cyber attacks, and they'll role play and see how they should respond. But it's obviously you are pioneering this approach in, I guess, the corporate center and the business development of companies as well as entrepreneurs. But it's still not the norm in many companies. It's quite a shift, even though, as you say, the benefits are obvious, the engagement is obvious, and obviously it helps the outcomes. But perhaps I could just turn now to put yourself in the mindset of either one of the CEOs you worked with, or perhaps one of the entrepreneurs, and they're setting up their new business, or they're they're taking on a new CEO role, and they've got a complete, they've got all their strengths behind them, they've got all their experience, but they have a completely sort of fresh, open mindset, and they say, right, I now need to refresh a strategy. I need to develop it and execute it in the best possible way. I want to do it really, really well. I want to learn from my mistakes in the past, and I want the best. And I've got the capital and funding and ambition and everything to do it. So obviously it's a nirvana situation. I get the fact that you've got the tools you just referenced. From all of your experience, Chris, what other either tools, capabilities, or actions they really need to focus on to make their strategy, successful?
David, that's a great question, and it really maybe goes back to the very heart of what is strategy. Now, the way that we frame it, strategy is very simple, and you have to keep it simple in order to rally people around it. A few definitions, of course. It is, where do we want to go and how we're going to get there? Very simple. It is, which choices should we make? It is, which industry position or arena position do we want to achieve, and how do we get there and establish defensive mechanisms around that? It is, how quickly can we cycle through a series of different business models simply by learning as quickly as we can, and then hopefully we'll get to something that works, which is more in the Amazon style. But this is, David, this is a question that's really been almost bugging, if you will, me for maybe 20 years. And it's really one of the key questions that led to the work that we've been doing. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share something on the screen, and then we'll talk through it in light of your recording. So if you are able to enable my screen sharing, please. Brilliant.
Is that on?
Now it's working. Thank you. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at this before we talked.
Yeah.
But I mean, your question here really made me sit down and think. So let's walk through this. Let's see if it makes sense, and I'll try to keep it quick and short. So at any given time, David, I have probably between 5 or 6 sort of strategy projects running. Some of them I'm very involved with. Some I'm sort of more of a step back in a very low-key advisory role. But the first thing that strikes me is, my clients have very different time horizons. Some of them will just say, Chris, realistically, we only work in 2 or 3 years cycles, and that's all we're going to do, even though we are committing capital that may have 20 years, implication. So our strategy is only going to be around 2 to 3 years. And we have the 5-year perspective, which may be a little bit more common. But I also find a smaller number that I say, we're really trying to look ahead. We really want to understand how this industry is shaping itself and reshaping itself. And we also know that some of the investments we'll be making today, pharma, maybe one example, they're only going to come to play in maybe even 15 years.
Yes.
So that's one. But this timeline, is not all that new. But what I see though is what I call the disruption scale. This is completely new thinking. We're just trying to clarify ourselves. And historically, most industries have been characterized with fairly low disruption threat. There's rather limited dynamics. I mean, there's change, of course, but the fundamental disruption of how an industry works has been relatively low. But of course, we're partially due to technology, access to capital, speed of new companies scaling up. We're seeing this disruption scale climb in certain industries for certain companies.
Yeah.
Maybe even up to a very, very high. So when you have those, the question is, well, what is our mindset as a CEO or as a management team when we get into the process of strategy? Do we have a short-term time focus and we assume very limited changes to our environment? Well, in that case, we're going to be firmly inside the box. We're going to be, basically doing more of the same, and we'll be locked in to a very rational approach to strategy. Then we have the planning horizon. After all, let's take the big oil. Whatever happens, the world is still going to need oil. There's enough resources in the ground, so we can play the long game, and whatever up and down price cycle we have, that's going to even itself out over a number of years. So we can plan for 50-year time horizons because change doesn't really matter to us.
So Chris, on that one, can I ask a question as I go through? So on that box, would that be in a sort of more the exploiting phase with minimal exploration? Exploration in oil sense is the wrong term to use.
No, you're spot on. Yeah.
Okay, that works. Yeah.
So it is very much business as usual.
Yeah.
But of course, increasingly, big companies are realizing that our assumption about stability is proving itself very wrong. And we need to actually really rethink our assumptions. We need to probably free up a lot of assets and redeploy capital radically different. And we need to be able to build a much better portfolio of what we call core business, growth businesses, and also the explore businesses, and find that sort of balance. And then, of course, the final stage, which we also see a number of, is companies that are just coming in and they're extremely quick in their growth and scaling.
The one area I'm curious about is, discovery-driven or experiment-driven strategy is well known and increasingly well practiced. Again, the challenge that I see in some companies I've worked with and or researched is that how do you go from that sort of mindset and practice to it becoming a norm, an ongoing activity, rather than it being, okay, we're doing that to formulate our strategy and to place some bets and to get into transform over time. But once we're there, we'll effectively move down the box back to a planning mindset. Because you've done the acceleration, you've done the new stuff, and then unless you change perhaps change the team, change the way you work, redeploy capital, it's very easy to slip back, right? So I'm interested in how your experience, how you scale up and sustain experiment-driven or discovery-driven strategy.
Yeah, no, again, a great question, and I think the honest answer is that is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But also I think that is changing. So if we look at traditional change management, one of the classics is you have an organization you need to change, so you unfreeze, you change whatever needs changing, and you refreeze, so you can take it back into operations mode. Yes. Well, that doesn't work very much.
No.
I would propose, and that's built into our work. I'll just show you this thing up here. It's built up to transformation, or strategy as transformation, is an organizational capacity. It's a muscle that needs to be developed. It is not a matter of changing from A to B. It is a matter of building this capability, down to the people and the resource allocation processes, et cetera, so you can do it again and again and again. And here. So when I bring these questions right here, which is taken from the Transformational Company Index, executives, they fully agree, and then they share how incredibly difficult it is for many reasons.
Right. Right.
But I think it is really upon us, especially with large companies, that the way they are built and structured and the way they think, it just, if they're going to survive, it needs to change into a much more agile approach, and like you were saying, discovery-driven approach or experiment-driven approach. But I think where most companies get it wrong, it's quite clear to me at least, and so what I find on that is too many companies are trying to change their core business, and they just exert all energy and resources into changing what doesn't want to be changed.
Yes. Yes.
Now, what we have learned again with the portfolio approach is, you can tweak and tune your core business, but by God, don't try to change it very much. Sell it if you have to, close it if you need to, but don't try to change it. What you can do though, is you can build up new growth areas, and then you can build up new explore areas, which are completely different animals. And if you want the core people to get into those growth or explore categories, maybe not a good idea, because that's not what they want. It's not what they can. It's not the background. So when I work with larger organizations on this, we really try to say, okay, we have a core business, whatever that is. Let's just ring fence that off and leave it, and optimize it, sure. But then you want to look at your growth businesses and say, how can we expand those and how can we scale those? Maybe with internal recruiting or external recruiting. But then we have the explore category, which is completely different funding mechanisms, different value creation ideas, and different culture. And if you're able to separate these three, life will be much, much easier.
Yeah, it's a very good it's a great mindset shift, because it's because I guess the core is what you're used to. If you've grown up with the organization or you're in that space, it's comforting in some ways because you know how things work, and so let's invest the time. Whereas, as you were saying, you should redefine the core by that exploration, and then make sure the connections are right, whether that's, as you say, talent, capital, synergies, where there are. Absolutely right. I mean, just going back to one point earlier, we've talked about technology as obviously a source of disruption. You've been using technology in this call, which is fantastic and very slick, I have to say, compared to me or many others. One area I've been exploring is, in a way, how much potential could artificial intelligence play in the strategy and broader transformation process? And I'm not referring to applying AI in a function like customer service or R&D, which or other areas which it already is, but actually in actually identifying patterns or relationships or correlations to, if you like, come up with ideas either to improve the exploitation of a business or the exploration. And I was curious, Chris, as to, from all of your wide-ranging work, how prevalent you've seen companies and their executives apply AI in that way.
So if I can, David, I want to just give two slightly different answers. So
I'm enjoying that, and I'm enjoying your reframing all the time. It's brilliant. Love it.
Thank you. No, AI is here to stay. AI in the medium term is going to completely disrupt the consulting business as we know it. I mean, completely. A lot of the consulting companies today that have body shop models, like the McKinseys and like the Bains and like the Accentures, they're going to find themselves with a lot less junior people, because machines will do that job, and that's just a given. It is just a question of time before that happens. In fact, our entire business for us in the longer term is we are going to build the technology solutions to replace how strategy gets done in many businesses. Now, granted, that's going to take some time. Many clients isn't ready for it, but there's no way that AI is not going to fundamentally disrupt the practice of strategy. Having said that, um, there's a lot of things happening in the field of technology. So technology meets strategy, new customer needs, new solutions, very rapid learning cycle. You know, we can do stuff that I wouldn't even imagine like 2 years ago. And are you able to see this video? That's
yes,
running
I'm curious. As people watch this, they'll probably be intensively listening and watching you. But frankly, we'll probably be looking at this simulation you've got on the screen, thinking, "God, that looks really interesting." Come on, Chris, tell me all about it.
So this is a national transformation project in Costa Rica that I was running yesterday from the comfort of this office in Norway. So what you're seeing here is around 60 people, all working from home or working from an office in lockdown, collaborating on shaping what we call a life science supercluster in Costa Rica. Working on this screen, we have government officials, ministry officials, we have executives, we have startups, we have investors, I mean, the whole landscape. I would normally do this, you know, by airplane, by workshops, by getting people together in a very large ballroom. But this works fine. And what you're seeing on the video is a combination of different technology bits that we have assembled together. And we are, this week, David, we're delivering about 10 hours of workshop to a total of 100 people. Everything is working remote. And, you know, between the two of us, they love it because it works.
Yeah. And so those arrows, for example, and so on, they are, I guess you or your colleagues will be hosting it. You have different ways of encouraging participation, right? Through, I guess, sharing ideas, whiteboarding, and so on. But as I say, that is exactly the activity you would be doing in the workshops, the full-day workshops. But you've created all your harnessing tools that make it easy for people to participate, right? You're not teaching at them. They're not just watching. They are actively involved in the process, right?
They are actively involved, and as you can see, you know, this picture right here, we provide the platform, we provide the right tools at the right time. Yes. But all the content is being produced by the participants as they are working in digital breakout rooms to sort of discuss and create and discuss and create, discuss and create. And
just if I can intervene, so I get all that. How far will you go then in terms of then moving from being, if you like, an enabler, curator, convener to okay, Chris, so you've heard all of this. What do you reckon? Does it go that far to sort of more traditional advice as well as
yeah. But you know, the way I very often would approach you know, the role of an advisor is much more by asking questions, framing the right questions, and then it is really up to the key stakeholders to, you know, drive it forward with me, you know, nudging and pushing and helping them along. Now, I have access to a very large data set here. So by Friday evening, David, when all this is finished, I'm going to have a massive, you know, data set that I'm going to take back together with our team in Costa Rica. We're going to be reviewing this, and that's going to help us, you know, write up what are the next steps. What's coming out of all of this engagement.
What's brilliant about it, Chris, is that, and you'll know this, but I'm sort of newer to it, and perhaps the audience is newer to it, is your ability to involve a larger number of people quicker is quite remarkable. And probably in many cases, inviting them in a way that's easier, because there are clearly still benefits of doing things in person. I get that. But there will be many people who perhaps because they're shouted down, scared, not able to contribute in a physical sense as a dominant person. Technology in a way enables that to get, I guess, a broader group of people to contribute more. And then, as you say, the capture is either more automated or more enabled, so you can actually produce stuff at scale and anyway push it back and then work out what do you do next. If you think about strategies and organizations, the sort of typical strategic process, and clearly isn't one, but if you think about the the old school ones, from having a chief strategy officer working with the CEO, small team, asking the groups, the business units and the divisions or whatever they are, for inputs, and then in a way bringing it back to the center, and then effectively going on a roadshow and saying, hey, by the way, please comment and contribute, but this is how it's beautifully packaged. It's so beautifully packaged that actually people don't really want to comment because it's done. Of course, it's never as bad as that, but I could probably quote you a few examples where it's not that far off. This turns a lot of this on the head from being the strategy role in a corporate for being, yes, they have expertise, of course, but it's more curiosity, more reframing, more enablement. It's quite a shift in mindset and capability of the chief strategy officer and the team around him or her, isn't it?
You know, David, this is a great catch. I mean, it really is one of the key points here. So this is, of course, what Gary Hamel would call the democratization of strategy. You know,
yes.
Who owns the process? Well, you know, what I'm showing here, you know, this is infinitely scalable. If we wanted to, we could have 8,000 people working in the same format, and they would all just, you know, dial in, connect, work through the process, and then leave again. It changes the process. But if I look at some of the, you know, most meaningful projects I've worked on over the years, for example, working very closely with Equinor on their long-term transformation journey, what we have done is not to focus on what is the new strategy. What we have done is what is the new strategy process, and by changing the process, you also change the outcome. And we do this by opening it up, by asking questions rather than giving analysis. We do it by working visually as opposed to, you know, murder by PowerPoint. So what you're seeing here is really just an extension of how do we continue to innovate around the process of strategy. And you know, this just allows us to do this very scalable, completely digital, and it works.
And I guess over time you will be either for a single organization, as you say, either in this example in Costa Rica or across organizations anonymized, you will have, as I say, masses of information, masses of data, that over time, I guess you could move closer to the sort of, I guess, a degree of causality in terms of if we have a sense of, if you take these actions, we know with a certain degree of confidence that X, Y, and Z outcomes happen around these conditions, which has always been the, I guess, the challenge in any strategy process, which is, of course, you're going to have the experience of the people involved. You're going to do analysis of the market, but sometimes it's can be quite static, can be quite sort of singular in terms of either the perspective they have on the organization or the industry. Yet if you can collate and mine and interpret data, I don't think it gives you the answer where you press the button and say, by the way, tell me what you should do. But it gets a degree of sophistication around that causality question, which I think is often being missing from a strategy process.
No, again, you know, if I can give you a list of references just right on this topic, and where we see strategy going, and where we see our platform going is really getting to that point. David, are you familiar with CB Insights?
Yes. Yeah.
So if you dig really deep, this is almost what they're offering now. It's not really, you know, apparent on the landing page for most of us, but if you really look into sort of the more advanced corporate services, I mean, they have a data capability that is starting to get extremely attractive to companies.
Right.
And I think many of the winners in the future will have this capability as a natural capability within strategy, where they can do data mining of large data sets, and they get, just like you're saying, you know, at least these pointers that is maybe not as apparent to, you know, the human eye and the human process.
Yeah. I have to say, I love the way you're very thoughtful about the questions and improve and reframe my questions on every occasion, which is a good note to self. So I'm a student as well. I love the four box framework, which I think is already making me think of companies about how they are presenting themselves as either a disruptor, whether they're actually a planner, or actually transformation where its strategy is normal. And then, as you say, a completely new way. I mean, I know you've been doing this for years, but for some company, a new way of doing and executing strategy in a way that's enjoyable and fun, ultimately to a commercial goal as well. I feel, and no wonder you're so successful, because I can see it working and I can see the dynamism in the room. So, Chris, for now, I'm really, really grateful for your time. That was a fantastic conversation.